2016-03536 in the matter of the application of Rocky Mountain Power to implement programs authorized by the Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan Act. This is the hearing on Phase 1 of this docket as noticed up in the scheduling order. Why don't we start with appearances for the utility?
Thank you, Chairman LaBarre. Daniel Solander, representing Rocky Mountain Power. I have with me at council table Steve McDougall, who will be one of the company's witnesses today.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Justin Jetter, and I'm here representing the Utah Division of Public Utilities today. With me at council table is division witness Bob Davis, and the division also intends to call David Thompson as an additional witness today, and he's just behind us.
Okay. Thank you.
Rex Olson on behalf of the Office of Consumer Services, and at the table with me is Bela Vostog, who will be a witness, and we will also be calling Danny Martinez and Cheryl Murray as well.
Okay. Thank you. Says?
Good morning. Sophie Hayes on behalf of Utah Clean Energy, and we will be calling Ms. Sarah Wright as our witness.
Thank you.
Good morning. Jennifer Gardner representing Western Resource Advocates, and we will be calling Kenneth Wilson as our witness.
Okay. Thank you. That appears to be all the appearances we have this morning. Does anyone have any preliminary matters before we move on with the utilities presentation, Mr. Solander?
I just have one question. We filed with the application several exhibits that aren't necessarily part of the Phase 1 proceeding.
Right.
So I don't know if it was cleaner to enter the application and all of the exhibits into the record, or if you'd like me to, as we go through, move the exhibits that correspond to the individual witnesses' testimony today.
That might be the cleanest way to go. Let me just look around the room and see if any other party wants to weigh in on the issue. I'm not seeing any indication that anybody has any preference, but yeah, since we have some testimony that's not relevant to today's hearing, it might be cleaner just to do them as the witnesses, to introduce them as the witnesses.
Thank you.
Present. Thank you. Any other preliminary matters? Okay, Mr. Solander.
Thank you. Rocky Mountain Power would like to call Ian Andrews as its first witness in support of the clean coal research projects.
Mr. Andrews, do you swear to tell the truth? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Andrews.
Morning.
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Ian Andrews, I-A-N-A-N-D-R-E-W-S.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Rocky Mountain Power, I'm Director of Resource Development.
And as the Director of Resource Development, did you prepare and file in this proceeding direct testimony and Exhibit B to the company's application, which is titled the Clean Coal Program?
I did.
At this time, I'd move that the pre-filed testimony of Mr. Ian Andrews and Exhibit B to the company's application be moved into the record.
Okay, I'll ask anyone who objects to that motion to indicate to me. And I'm not seeing any, so that motion's granted.
Okay, and I'd also move the entry of the application into the record as well.
Okay, I'll ask if anyone has any opposition to that to indicate to me. And I'm not seeing any, so that motion will be granted also.
Thank you. And after you filed the testimony in this proceeding, did you have the opportunity to participate in technical conferences with the parties?
We did. We had a technical conference on October 18th on the two topics we'll discuss today.
And at the end of that technical conference, did you believe that there were any outstanding questions from the parties that had yet to be answered at that point?
I believe we answered all the questions that were asked.
And have you prepared a summary of your testimony that you'd like to share with the Commission today?
I have.
Please proceed.
Apologize for reading this, but I don't want to miss any points. So what we pursuant to our STEP legislation, the company is requesting approval to apply $5 million in STEP funding over a 5-year period and to investigate, analyze, and research clean coal technology. As defined in the legislation, clean coal technology means a technology that may research, developed, or used for reducing emissions or the rate of emissions from a thermal electric generating plant that uses coal as a fuel source. To meet that objective, the company proposes to allocate these funds across a number of projects that focus on the capture, reduction, and sequestration of carbon dioxide and the reduction of nitrogen oxides, also known as NOx. Funding will go towards these specific projects that will be performed or assisted by Utah universities, Utah technology firms that process woody waste, and CO2 capture technologies that may result in lower capture costs in comparison to traditional methods. The selected projects are intended to meet multiple objectives, and these are the 4 objectives: to demonstrate projects that result in measurable emission reductions, to invest in promising technologies and applications that may advance technologies when fully developed and applied at utility scale, that will allow for coal-fired generating resources to operate with reduced carbon dioxide emissions, and provide funding and opportunities for industry-targeted areas of research that can be performed by Utah's universities, and to promote Utah's clean energy technologies. We have 7 projects that are proposed under the Clean Coal Research Program. The 2 that I'll discuss today, which were the Phase 1 projects that we submitted at our October 18th meeting, are the application of a neural network control system at Huntington Unit 2 for the reduction of NOx, and the implementation of a utility-scale demonstration of an alternative for decreasing NOx emissions without the use of selective catalytic reduction system, also known as an SCR. Both of these projects were presented at our technical conference on October 18th. The first project I'd like to discuss a little and briefly is approximately a $1 million project that would be applied over the 5-year period, and that is for an advanced neural network control system at Huntington Unit 2. For this project, it is proposed to install a neural network optimization control system on that unit with the objective of targeting NOx reductions, followed by a reduction in other emissions associated with combustion. Subsequent to this effort will be an additional objective to balance those reductions with unit efficiency improvements. Along with the combustion optimization, there are other plant processes that may benefit from a neural network optimization system. For this project, the University of Utah will partner with Rocky Mountain Power and the software provider to install, demonstrate, and fundamentally research artificial intelligence technology to improve emissions from this unit. If successful, this would be applicable to similar boilers at the Hunter and Huntington plants. The second project that we're proposing is approximately a $1.4 million project for utility scale demonstration of alternative NOx emission control technologies. This particular clean coal research project is proposed to perform 1 or more slipstream or full-scale demonstration tests of 1 or more NOx emission control technologies at the Huntington plant. The objective of this test program will be to determine if there are 1 or more emerging NOx control technologies, either on a standalone or combined basis, that could achieve NOx emission rates similar to those expected with an SCR system and at lower cost. The STEP Clean Coal research monies would be used to fund all or a portion of these NOx emission control demonstrations. In order to identify which technologies will be tested, a request for proposal process will be conducted in calendar year 2017. Criteria that will be used to select technologies will include an assessment of whether the technology can be installed at full scale, previous operational experience, permitting impacts, economics, an assessment of the long-term reliability of the technology, and the ability of the underlying technology company to provide commercially viable performance warranties or guarantees. Prior to the distribution of the RFP, a request for information would be issued to determine levels of interest, identify technology consolidation or partnering companies, and prepare a short list of potential technology providers for the RFP. So that summarizes the 2 projects we have in mind.
Does that conclude your testimony?
It does.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews is available for questions from the commission or the parties.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cheddar?
No questions from the division. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson?
No questions from the office?
Ms. Hayes?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gardner?
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner White, do you have any questions for him?
I don't know, but are we going to have the opportunity for potential, I mean, I guess part of the question with respect to some of the clean coal technology OMAG costs. I just want to make sure that we have the right, the ability, if necessary, to come back to Mr.
Is there any objection to keeping the witnesses in the room throughout the hearing if there's any need for further questions?
Absolutely not, thank you.
Okay, so do you have any questions at this point?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions.
Okay, I don't either. Thank you, Mr. Andrews, and if we have questions for you later, we'll ask you to return. Mr. Solinder?
Thank you. Rocky Mountain Power would call Mr. Douglas Marks in support of the Utah Battery and Solar Project.
Mr. Marks, do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Morning.
How you doing?
Well, thank you. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Douglas Marks. It's Douglas and Marx.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Rocky Mountain Power. I'm the Director of Engineering Standards and Technical Services.
And as the Director of Engineering Standards and Technical Services, did you prepare testimony and a confidential Exhibit D that were filed in this docket?
I did.
Do you have any corrections or additions to your testimony or the exhibit at this time?
I do not.
I'd like to move the admission of Mr. Marks's testimony and confidential Exhibit D, which was labeled as Solar and Energy Storage Program.
Okay, I'll ask any party who objects to that to indicate to me. I'm not seeing any, so that motion's granted.
Thank you. And Mr. Marks, did you have the opportunity to prepare a summary of your testimony that you'd like to share with the Commission today?
I did, yes.
Please proceed.
Okay. Pursuant to the STEP legislation, the company is requesting authorization to use $5.05 million of the STEP funding to install a stationary battery system to be installed on the 12.5 kilovolt distribution circuits connected to a company-owned substation in Utah. In addition, the company proposes to utilize an additional $1.95 million from Blue Sky Community Funds to install a large-scale company-owned solar project in conjunction with the battery installation. The battery storage and solar technology is expected to defer or eliminate the need for traditional capital investments and will reduce the loading on the distribution power transformer, improve voltage conditions, and mitigate costs associated with connection on the 69 kilovolt bus at the substation. The program will provide a number of benefits to the company's customers, particularly those in the immediate area of the project. The benefits include, 1, reducing load on the distribution power transformer at the substation, ensuring the voltage in the area does not drop below ANSI standards. 2, providing high-speed reactive power support to ensure load rejection in the area does not impact voltage levels. 3, deferring the need for traditional capital investment in the forms of poles and wires. 4, enabling the company to obtain first-hand operational experience with control algorithms and efficiency levels associated with energy storage and in combination with solar. 5, enabling the company to become familiar with and utilize innovative technologies to provide customers with solutions to power quality issues. And last, providing an opportunity for the company to meet requests from its Blue Sky customers for physical, still-in-the-ground renewable facilities in the form of solar generation. The company anticipates that it will implement similar projects in the future, and its experience with battery storage and solar will continue to provide dividends by giving the company experience with and the opportunity to implement future projects more efficiently. There are no limitations or risks to the applicability or technological feasibility of the battery solar solution for this project. This is a solution that continues to mature and has been proven in many installations across the country. Due to the lack of operational data available at the time of the project proposal, the only uncertainty with this solution is the total number of operations that will be required of the battery on an annual basis. Since the initial study, Rocky Mountain Power has completed the installation of appropriate metering at the substation, and continuous data will soon be available. While only limited data is available for 2016, full data will become available during 2017 and beyond, and prior to the installation of the battery. The new metering will provide all of the required data for proper determination of the battery operational metrics. The company consistently implements reliability and power quality enhancements on its transmission and distribution systems to mitigate operational and performance problems. Recognizing that energy storage and renewable energy will be major contributors to grid modernization, The company has identified a logical location to pilot a range of technologies for battery, storage, and solar, metering, etc. This project enables us to correct a voltage issue for our customers in the area using an innovative technology in lieu of traditional infrastructure, and concurrently provides a platform to objectively study and enhance the operational performance of a technology that will begin to permeate this system as more renewable and distributed generation systems are connected to the grid now and in the future.
Thank you. Can you explain what the primary goal of voltage correction measures are?
The primary application of it is to ensure that the voltage levels delivered to our end-use customers fall within the ANSI standards and control standards. It's the end-use customer where our focus is. The voltage will change on the system, but what we're trying to ensure is the end-use customer gets a good quality voltage.
And what would happen if the company made engineering decisions on how to achieve that and other engineering and system balancing decisions based on how the cost would be allocated?
When we design systems, we do it to optimize the performance of the system. If we did it based on economic allocations, it would lead us to a suboptimal condition in our design of our systems. For example, let's take a voltage problem and do it in the state of Idaho. In the state of Idaho, our allocation is on transmission levels is around 6%. So if I have a voltage problem, I can choose to do capacitor correction or regulation at either the distribution level or the transmission level. So if I do it at the distribution level, hanging a 600 kVAR cap bank on a pole is relatively inexpensive. I take it, I bring that up to the distribution level, a larger capacitor, do it on the 12 kV bus. It's not much more expensive than doing a pole. But once I move that to the transmission side of the bus, still within the same perimeter of the fence line, I've just increased my cost by about 3 times in that installation. So what you look at is if I did it based on allocations and you used a 6% allocation, in Idaho, I'd probably spend the money on the high side bus because I've got 15 times more money to spend than I do on the low side bus. But what that does is it impacts my capital budgets. We've got a limited capital area, and it thus is going to push the rates up for all the customers across all of our service territories in all states we serve. So when we design, we look for conditions that economically drive good engineering decisions, not looking at how the allocation drives those engineering decisions.
Thank you. That concludes my questions for Mr. Marks. He's available for questions from the commission or the parties.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter? Thank you, Mr. Olson.
I guess I'd like to just follow up on what I understood the last statement you made. You said that there are economic considerations that would drive any of these decisions, which makes sense, but that those economic decisions are not in some way tied to the interjurisdictional allocation. Is that?
That's correct.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hayes?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Clark, do you have anything at this point?
No questions.
Commissioner White?
Just one. There's discussion about allocation. One particular question I had is what is a precise issue driving the need for this voltage support? And let me tell you what kind of prompted this question. It was actually from Mr. McDougall's rebuttal testimony where he talks about the missed opportunity to investigate the impact of distributed energy resources on Utah customers. Help me understand what is actually driving the need for this voltage support on this circuit.
There's three primary factors that drive voltage problems. Okay, it's the impedance of the system, and that's multiplied by the length of the line. And the primary thing is the current flow on the conductors. So what you have is a load condition. Have to be careful. I don't want to name the substation. So at the substation, I have a voltage condition that I need to correct because of the load out on the distribution network. So two ways I can correct that voltage. One is to change my conductors, increase them in size to lower the impedance. The other one is to reduce the load. So when you look at the peak levels, they only happen for short periods of time during the year, even though we build our system to handle those, because we don't know when that's going to occur. With this technology, we can take in a very flexible, dynamic design to just answer the question when those peaks occur. When you increase your conductors, you do this based on some forecast of expected load growth. So you hear the question, well, let's look at the economics of increasing that line because that line will last for 50 years. Well, you know what? The wire in the air will probably last for 100 years, but it depends on the load growth on when I might have to reconductor that. So in this area, if we get some unexpected load growth, I may be back reconductoring that sooner than I would have if I use a scalable short-term technology that I can rapidly implement without significant changes. So the big driver here is the load at the distribution level for short periods of time during the year is creating voltage problems back into the system. At the distribution level, the power transformer, even on the transmission, it's a ripple effect. So do I increase my conductors or do I reduce my load? So we're seeing here that there's a technology we can do at a lower initial cost to hit that for short periods of time in the year that's scalable, and we can do that more incrementally over time as load grows or doesn't appear, depending on how good our crystal balls are at the time we make the installation. So does that help?
Yep, that helps. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question or two? Recognizing that you don't have a crystal ball, but that you have some history with the requirements of the particular distribution system or part of your distribution system and how often do you expect to call on the power that's stored, and for how long would it be called on when you need it? Just your general sense of what your expectations might be.
In this area, there's two times during the year we're going to see it. In the dead of winter, when we have a lot of heating load. In the middle of summer, when we have a lot of cooling load. And it's going to be for typically anywhere from an hour to 4 hours per day, or generally 30 to 45 days in each period, depending on local climate conditions at the time we need it. So with this project, also what we're looking at is by building the solar next to the battery, we can actually control this to say, okay, what happens in these different what-if scenarios? What happens if I get to a point where I've got more generation in a small area than I do have actual load? Am I able to take that, store it, and release it at another time? So we can do a lot of what-if scenarios with this technology by having the control of the two. So it's a few. As time goes on and the load grows, it'll change. It can become more or less until such time that we do have significant growth that may require other technologies to solve those issues.
And given the solar profile of this area, you expect that in the winter the system would operate sufficiently, or in other words, there would be enough regeneration of the batteries to satisfy the needs of...
In the winter condition, it actually works out really good. The concern at the initial, because we did a fairly small solar installation, is that we may have to augment some of that battery charging at night with the other resources. But like I said, we did this, we basically put metering up for a very short period of time to get us the granularity data. We can make some assumptions to see would this technology work or not. So as the new metering goes in and we start to see that coming in, we can refine that a little bit tighter. But I think we're going to be okay with just what we've got for the solar and the installed battery, that it can take care of that charging for that. So that local generation will get released right back into the immediate area. There is not enough solar generation there to permeate back into my system at all. It'll get consumed there by the local load in one way or the other. We're just going to try to shift the peak from the middle of the day generation to the evening when the load does occur.
Thank you. That concludes my questions.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for this witness, Mr. Solander? Okay, thank you, Mr. Marks.
Thanks.
Mr. Solander?
Thank you. Rocky Mountain Power would like to call James Campbell as its third witness.
Mr. Campbell, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Campbell.
Good morning.
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
James Campbell, Jamescampbell.
And what is your current position with Rocky Mountain Power?
I'm the Legislative Policy Advisor.
And as part of your duties as the Legislative Policy Advisor, did you prepare testimony and Exhibit E to the application, which is entitled Gadsby Emissions Curtailment Program?
I did.
And do you have any additions or corrections to that testimony that you'd like to make at this time?
I do not.
And did you prepare a summary of your testimony that you'd like to share with the Commission?
I did.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Pursuant to Senate Bill 115, the company is requesting approval for up to $500,000 in step funding over a 5-year period to cover the economic loss of curtailing the operation of Gadsby Power Plant Units 1 through 3 during periods of winter air quality events as defined by the Utah Division of Air Quality. The Gadsby Power Plant is located in the Salt Lake PM 2.5 non-attainment area. The power plant will be curtailed after a minimum of 48-hour notification from the Division of Air Quality of an impending air quality event. An air quality event is defined as when the Salt Lake non-attainment area's ambient air conditions are predicted by DAQ to be 25 micrograms per cubic meter for PM 2.5. Gadsby Units 1 through 3 typically do not operate in the winter. However, in the last 5 years, Units 1 through 3 have been dispatched in the winter, including during periods of extremely high ambient pollution. Since the units are only dispatched when they are economic to operate, there is an economic impact to not operate. The company proposes using a market proxy to determine the replacement power costs for not operating. The company proposes using the Four Corners Market Hub as the proxy, or if the Commission chooses, market pricing at either the Palo Verde or Mid-Sea Market. If the method of calculating the replacement power is not approved as part of the Gadsby curtailment program, then the potential unrecoverable costs would be an unacceptable risk for the company, and it would likely not proceed with implementing the program. The company proposes budgeting a total of $500,000 for the Gadsby curtailment program, and once the budget is exhausted, the program will end. If Gadsby is not scheduled to operate during an air quality event, then no action is taken and there is no economic loss and no replacement costs will be requested. Since Gadsby does not always dispatch in the winter and air quality events typically last roughly 3 weeks a year, it is believed that $500,000 is a sufficient budget to cover the costs of the Gadsby curtailment program.
Does that conclude your summary?
It does.
I'd move the admission of Mr. Campbell's direct testimony and Exhibit E to the application at this time.
Thank you. I'll ask anyone who objects to that to indicate to me. I'm not seeing any, so that motion's granted.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell is available for questions from the parties or the Commission.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jetter. Thank you. Mr. Olson?
No questions from the office, thank you.
Pace? Ms. Gardner?
No questions. Thanks.
Commissioner White?
Is there any reason or preference between the Four Corners, the Palo Verde, or the Mid-Sea, or is it, I mean, what was the rationale for choosing one or the other?
Mr. McDougall addressed this issue in his rebuttal testimony. Would it be okay if I
I'll
defer to him
yeah.
in that?
It's fine. Go ahead.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions.
I don't have any. Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
Thank you. Rocky Mountain Power would like to call Mr. Steve McDougall as its final witness today.
Mr. McDougall, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. McDougall.
Good morning.
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Stephen McDougall, Steven, McDougal.
And what is your current position with Rocky Mountain Power?
I'm currently employed as the Director of Revenue Requirement.
And as the Director of Revenue Requirement, did you prepare and cause to be filed in this docket supplemental and rebuttal testimony, as well as attachment 1 to the company's application, which is the proposed tariff sheets?
Yes,
And does your rebuttal testimony contain 7 exhibits? Is that correct?
I believe so. Let me look real quick. Yes.
Do you have any additions or corrections to your testimony or the exhibits attached thereto at this time?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I'd move the admission of attachment 1 to the company's application, RMP supplemental testimony filed by Steve McDougall, and RMP rebuttal testimony of Stephen McDougall and the exhibits thereto at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask any party who objects to indicate. Not seeing any, so that motion is granted.
Thank you. And have you prepared a summary of both your supplemental and rebuttal testimony that you'd like to share today?
Yes, I have. Before we get started, trying to think, I was thinking I had one exhibit on my direct testimony also. I attached the Utah STEP pilot program instructions, which I believe was an exhibit SRM-1. And just when you move for admission,
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'd also move the admission of that. I did not have it tabbed as a separate exhibit.
Any objection from anyone? Not seeing any, that motion is granted.
Thank you.
okay. As mentioned, I filed both supplemental and rebuttal testimony in this proceeding. I'll provide a brief summary of both filings. In my supplemental testimony, I basically cover 3 items. First, I cover the proposed changes in accounting for the Utah Demand Side Management, or DSM, programs. Basically, effective January 1st, 2017, Pacificorp will begin to defer the monthly DSM expenditures. Each monthly deferral will carry a 10-year amortization period. The difference between the DSM expenditures and the amortization expenses related to the deferred DSM expenditures will create a regulatory asset. That's very similar, almost identical to how we do all other capital assets. The second item I discuss is the accounting related to the new plant accelerated depreciation fund, which is that the difference between the customer collections from the surcharge attributable to DSM programs and the monthly amortization expense from the deferred DSM expenditures will create a plant accelerated depreciation fund, or a regulatory liability, that may be used to depreciate thermal generation plants as described in my testimony. Consistent with the legislation, the Commission needs to determine that the accelerated depreciation is in the public interest. Therefore, the company will make a filing with the Commission requesting the use of the funds in response to environmental regulation or for another purpose the company believes is in the public interest. The final authorization to use the funds will come from the Commission. Third, I discuss the company's proposed STEP accounting and reporting, which I then clarified in my rebuttal testimony. In my rebuttal testimony, I discussed various issues raised by the DPU, the office, and the Utah Clean Energy. My testimony includes a background on the company decision to propose the solar and energy storage program as part of STEP. As mentioned by Mr. Douglas Marks, the company projects that by 2019, the distribution load in the designated area will reach a point that will cause nominal voltage on the transmission lines serving the area of this project to drop below the required industry standards. In evaluating solutions to this problem, the company considered both transmission and distribution fixes. The company analyzes all of these investment option decisions based on total company results. Some parties proposed and mentioned looking at the Utah allocated portions. But by looking at the Utah allocated costs as discussed by the parties, only a portion of the transmission cost would be included in the analysis, creating an incorrect investment comparison that could lead to suboptimal decisions for the company and its customers. The company agrees that the benefits of the solar and energy storage program should be passed to Utah customers through the EBA. This will be done similar to the treatment of the Black Cap solar program in Oregon, such that Utah will be credited for the market value of the solar production as described in my testimony. No other adjustments other than those described above are needed to give Utah the benefit of the solar and energy storage program. Second item I discussed was Blue Sky funding. The company believes that the use of Blue Sky funding should be approved and is consistent with the purpose of the Blue Sky program. The energy generated by the solar installation should benefit all Utah customers and not just select community organizations. The administrative cost to create a grant program that applies credits to customer bills would require additional funding, including the creation of a new rate schedule, billing system modifications, and ongoing program management, none of which were contemplated or requested in the company's application. Third, I discussed the GASB emissions curtailment program. I described the company's proposed accounting and measurement of the costs associated with the GASB emissions curtailment program. The company's proposal provides a reasonable, quantifiable, and transparent approach to determining the replacement power cost for the GASB emission curtailment program. This is also consistent with the approach used for valuing Utah's benefit related to the solar and energy storage program. Fourth, I provided tariff sheet modifications. And the last item, I provided additional details on the company's proposed step accounting and reporting plan.
And did you have a final request and recommendation?
Yes, as supported by the company's application in this docket, the testimony of the company witnesses accompanying the application, and in my testimony, the company recommends that the commission find as follows. 1, the company has properly evaluated the solar and energy storage program. 2, the company proposed accounting treatment will properly allocate to Utah customers the benefits of the solar and energy storage program through the EBA. 3, it is appropriate to allow Blue Sky funding for the solar portion of the solar and energy storage program. 4, it is not appropriate or feasible to establish a grant program to benefit community service organizations based on the kilowatt hours generated by the solar portion of the solar and energy storage program. 5, the replacement power costs resulting from operation of the GASB emissions curtailment program should be calculated using the Four Corners trading market. 6, the various tariff sheet filed with my supplemental testimony reflecting the modifications and needed corrections addressed by parties are approved. And 7, the company proposed reporting plan provides all appropriate step reporting information. The company further respectfully recommends the Commission approve all issues under consideration in Phase 1 of this docket as outlined in my rebuttal testimony and the application and testimony of other company witnesses in this docket.
Does that conclude your summary?
Yes, it does.
Mr. McDougall, does the company support the alternative proposal put forth by Ms. Wright on behalf of UCE for creating a credit or grant program with the energy generated by the solar and battery storage program?
No, we do not.
And why not?
1, there isn't excess energy as mentioned by Mr. Marks. The energy will all be used there locally. 2, as I mentioned in my summary and in my testimony, the solar program is going to benefit all Utah customers, not just select customers, and therefore we believe that the benefit should flow to all Utah customers through the EBA by giving them that market benefit.
And my final question, if the Commission ordered that the cost of the solar and battery storage program were to be system allocated, would the company be more or less likely in the future to pursue distributed generation projects?
Less likely, because what we would be saying is that those kind of decisions should be based upon allocations. And if you look at allocations, the distributed generation are a situs-type program, and they're benefiting systems. They should be directly allocated to that state.
Thank you. That concludes my questions for Mr. McDougall. He's available for cross-examination or questions from the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter?
I've just got a few questions. Good morning, Mr. McDougall.
Good morning.
See, just looking at, it's page 3 of your rebuttal testimony, you described the solar and generation program. I'm looking at line 64.
Okay.
And you had described it as a program to, quote, solve a voltage issue on the transmission system caused by distribution load in the area. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. And is it fair to say that transmission voltage problems requiring reconductoring or upgrades are practically always caused by increased demand on the distribution system?
Yes, I think that was described by Mr. Marks earlier.
Okay. And you've said that the investment decision should be made without regard to the allocation model. You should be choosing the lowest cost alternative. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And would it then be fair to expect the similar protections for Utah customers to the extent that transmission upgrades in other states might be offset by local projects similar to this?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question, so I'll try to answer. If I don't get it right, correct me. But I think that all of your decisions can be done both ways, and it's just like, you know, a DSM program can help to eliminate transmission issues, and so can other items. And we treat those all similar where they are situs allocated.
Okay. And I guess my question is, as a I guess a representative, looking out to some extent for the interests of Utah customers, it would be fair then for Utah customers to expect the company to make similar decisions in other states without
Yes.
regard to allocation.
Correct. And that is what the company does. As I mentioned in my testimony, we look at the decisions based upon a total company view. We don't say that, in Mr. Mark's example, a transmission upgrade in Idaho where they only get allocated 6%, but they could move 43% to Utah. You don't want to make that decision based upon how Idaho has allocated the costs and make Utah try to bear additional costs when they make a suboptimal decision. And likewise, we expect that in all states to look at what's the best for the system. It's the only way that a combined system is going to be optimized.
I think it would also be fair probably to, in this specific instance, to indicate that or to reach the conclusion that this particular project is going to cost Utah customers more than it would were its system allocated. That's accurate, is that?
Yes, that is.
Okay. That's all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. McDougall.
Good morning.
So, based on what I understand the testimony that you've provided, both you and Mr. Marks, these kinds of decisions regarding distribution solutions, or what I guess your guys are characterizing as transmission solutions, are not new to the system. You have thousands of miles of both distribution and transmission lines, so these come up more than once, I guess.
Yes.
So, do you know, or are you aware of whether or not you have a breakdown by regulatory jurisdiction about how frequently, if it's a transmission, as a circumstance here where it's a transmission-related issue, you say is driven by distribution, when the company has elected to make a transmission decision as opposed to a distribution application as you're done here, do you have any sense of how frequently those two types of decisions are made?
No, I don't. That would be, the engineering group would look at what is the most optimal decision, and I don't have any information on that universe of decisions.
You've described some of the process that you went through here. Can you just help me understand with a little bit more specificity the factors that go into deciding whether or not you make a distribution decision versus a transmission decision?
I'll give it at a high level because the detailed decisions are not made by me. They're made by the engineering group and the others who really know the system and know what the options are. But what I do know is they will look at the range of options that are available and choose the one that fixes the problem and does so at the most economical way possible.
And thank you, and I want to make sure I understood something in your summary testimony that you just provided. You were saying that consideration of the system allocation could lead to suboptimal decisions. Is that what your concern was?
Yes.
That's not necessarily the case, that it would lead to a suboptimal decision.
As a full system, if everybody were to look at allocations, it would, in my opinion, because of the examples of, especially in the smaller states, if you can choose a decision that Idaho is one of our smaller states close to us, if you can choose a decision that you only get allocated 6% as opposed to 100%, Idaho would naturally choose the 6% and could lead to suboptimal decisions.
It could.
If those opportunities arise, which, as described by Mr. Marks, there are those decisions.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Ms. Hayes?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gardner?
No, thank you.
Any redirect?
Just one quickly. In that last example described by Mr. Olson, what would happen to overall system costs if each state made the decision to suboptimally assign or suboptimally solve problems by creating transmission instead of distribution level investments?
It would raise the overall cost because if the project was in Utah, Utah would only bear 43% and 57% could get shifted to other states. But if it's an overall more expensive option for the system, the same thing would happen in Oregon and Wyoming. They would make these decisions that might cost more, and Utah would have to bear 43% of those decisions from the states of Idaho and Oregon and Wyoming.
Thank you. Was there any recross, Mr. Jetter?
Yeah, just briefly. I'd like to, just in relation to that question, in this case, can you describe why it would be unfair to also expect Utah to, if Utah's paying 100% of the costs of this, would it be unreasonable for Utah to expect to retain 100% of the benefits if it's also situs assigned?
That is correct, and as described in my testimony and my summary, we are proposing to do that through looking at the market value and putting it into the EBA, where we say here is the value of this energy that's being produced, and give that value to Utah.
And so then is it fair to summarize, or to summarize that as meaning that the value that you're looking at is only the output of the solar facility and battery at market rates, and not adding any additional value for Utah customers for deferring a expensive upgrade to a facility?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other recross, Mr. Olson?
No, thank you.
Ms. Hayes? So, you know what the recross, Ms. Gardner? Okay. Commissioner White, any questions for Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, just a couple. To this issue, in terms of allocation, is it, putting aside the initial question from an engineering perspective of how to address a problem based upon, lease cost, et cetera, is there any bearing or relationship between a state-driven policy or statute that drives a project? I mean, does that have any, is that a part of the equation at all in terms of how a project is ever allocated?
It's only an issue related to the 2017 protocol. It does talk about state-specific initiatives should be situs allocated to those states starting the initiatives. And that was done within the 2017 protocol largely because of environmental or other restrictions or other programs that, as a general rule, things and decisions within a state result in those costs being borne by that state, not moved to others.
The follow-up question, just the one I had for Mr. Marks earlier, which is there anything, specific as to the choice to use the Four Corners, pricing hub for purposes of the replacement power, or is mid-C? I mean, it sounds like from the testimony that the company is indifferent between the three, but was there some reason or rationale driving the decision to choose Four Corners?
In talking with our system dispatch and the people who run the system, they said that the market hub that most closely resembles market prices in the state of Utah is Four Corners. It's the closest proxy, and it's the one that's really used a lot for the balancing on this side of the system.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
Thanks. It seems to me that one of the issues in front of us is that we have a relatively new technical approach to an old problem. The problem being the load in a given distribution area, creating the need for transmission augmentation. So one question I have is, tell me if you disagree with that characterization, but assuming it's roughly accurate, have you used this approach in at other locations in the Pacific Core system?
I am not aware of any time we've used this approach. This is more of a new approach that's available, that by starting it, we're going to gain more information, we're going to gain experience on how this can benefit, and if everything works out as what we hope, this is something that could spread, but it's something that we need to make that initial decision to move forward, and let's try to prove out what can be accomplished through this kind of a program.
And because of the allocation consequences of this planning decision versus an election to augment the transmission system in some way, I hear in the questions that you've been asked the desire for some kind of confirmation that the same decision rules will apply in other jurisdictions when you face this same kind of issue. And what are your feelings about that? Can you confirm for us that you'll continue to be consistent in how you look at you deploying this technological approach, assuming that it proves beneficial in this instance.
Yes, you know, as described by Mr. Marks and others, we're going to look at all of our decisions based upon what's most economic and what's best for the area. And if this works in other areas of the company, we would definitely propose it. If that, you know, if it works out and it's the most economical.
In your rebuttal testimony at line 81, you use the phrase suboptimal system operating results and increased overall costs. So my question is there an operational element to this too? That, in other words, would what I think you would view as an improper consideration of the cost allocation consequences in the decision-making process, would that drive suboptimal, not just increased costs or suboptimal financial results, but suboptimal operating results? And I just want to
Right.
understand what you mean by
Yeah.
that phrase.
By operating results, I'm talking about our operating and maintenance expenses or our expenses. As far as how we operate the system,
There wouldn't be a reliability risk or some other kind of risk that would be also
not that I am aware of,
part of this equation. Okay.
no.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further ones, so thank you, Mr. McDougall.
Okay.
Mr. Solinger.
That concludes Rocky Mountain Power's direct case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter.
Can I request maybe a 15-minute recess?
Sure. We'll reconvene at
Or
10,
maybe 10
10,
after.
10 after? Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. On the record. And I'll just comment to Rocky Mountain Power. In terms of follow-up questions from the commissioners, we would like to ask Mr. McDougall to remain around through the rest of the hearing, but I'm not sure there's a need for the other company witnesses. If there's any interest in releasing those witnesses rather than keeping them here for the whole hearing, we'll let that be your discretion.
Thank you.
And then we'll go to Mr. Jetter.
The division would, I'm sorry, I was speaking with my client. Are we,
Yes, yes.
the division would like to call and have sworn in Mr. Bob Davis.
Mr. Davis, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name and occupation for the record?
Bob Davis, I'm a utility analyst for the Division of Public Utilities.
Thank you. And in the course of your employment with the division and with respect to the matters that you've testified with to so far in this docket, did you create and cause to be filed with the commission DPU witness Robert A. Davis direct testimony filed on November 9th, 2016, along with rebuttal testimony filed on November 23rd, 2016?
Yes,
Do you have any edits or corrections you'd like to make to those?
I do not.
And if you were asked the same questions that are contained in those pre-filed testimonies today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
I'd move at this time to enter into the record direct and rebuttal testimony from DPU witness Robert Davis.
If any party objects to that, please indicate to me. I'm not seeing any objections, so the motion's granted.
Thank you. And Mr. Davis, have you prepared a brief statement today?
I have.
Please go ahead.
Good morning. The division reviewed the company's application for implementation of the STEP programs and categories of programs as contained in the Commission's Phase 1 order in this docket. The company has presented information about the programs to stakeholders throughout several technical conferences and data requests. After consideration of the proposed programs included in Phase 1 of the STEP program, the division recommends that the company be granted approval of the following. 1. Establishing a line item charge in customer bills for the funding of the STEP program. This category also includes establishing a regulatory liability account to depreciate thermal generation plant, revising tariff schedules 193 and 195, revising the Utah Solar Incentive Program, USIP, Schedule 107, which will close the USIP program to new customers at the end of December 2016, and approving implementation of the company's electric vehicle infrastructure incentive program. 2, approval of the solar and storage program. 3, approval of the Gadsby emission curtailment program. And 4, approval of the Clean Coal Technology Program for NOx reduction using neural networks and advanced selective catalytic reduction SCR applications. The division recommends that the company be required to report its progress and actual expenditures on these programs throughout the pilot at least annually through reports and/or technical conferences so the division and other stakeholders have the opportunity to review the STEP initiatives. The division recommends approval of this phase of the proceeding be subject to the accounting treatment and reporting requirements as outlined by the company through discussions during the technical conferences, other meetings with the company, testimony, and exhibits. Mr. David Thompson will address the division's review of the Phase 1 accounting treatment of the STEP program and revised tariff sheets that are being recommended for implementation. Schedule 107 has been revised to end the Utah Solar Incentive Program December 31st, 2016. Tariff sheet number 107 has been revised to remove the 2017 program incentive level and available capacity. The company is proposing to correct a transmission voltage issue in central Utah with a stationary battery storage system, along with a solar facility funded entirely by Utah customers through the STEP program. The battery and solar project will provide valuable training to company personnel which will provide benefits to all customers as distributed energy resources increase on the system. The division believes that company personnel need to gain as much understanding of distributed energy resources as possible. The division concern lies in the benefit spread to all companies' customers as a result of avoiding the transmission system upgrades that would otherwise be allocated system-wide through the multi-state protocol. By using STEP funds for this project, the solar and storage program is funded by Utah customers alone. The division recommends that at a minimum, the direct cost savings of the project be retained by Utah customers. The division proposes that the benefits flow through the EBA at the market value of the output to the grid. The division is also supportive of Utah Clean Energy's request that if funding in part or full is used from Blue Sky customers for the solar array, then the Blue Sky program should receive those same proportions of the net benefits from the system, provided the administrative costs do not outweigh the benefits. Using the EPA as a mechanism for Utah customers to retain the benefits would be easier to administer. Additionally, under the division's proposal, Blue Sky customers would get a benefit through the EBA adjustments, plus knowing Blue Sky funds were used for a renewable project. The division is supportive of the Office of Consumer Services treatment of operation, maintenance, and administrative and other OMAG expenses relating to the STEP program. The division does not believe unknown or known OMAG expenses should be borne by customers to support the pilot program outside of those covered by the STEP funding. The division supports the office's recommendation that OMAG expenses should be identified during the STEP pilot program and included in STEP funding. If STEP OMAG expenses are not included in STEP funding, then they should be removed from rates in the next general rate case. In conclusion, the division recommends that the commission approve the programs under consideration in phase 1 of this proceeding, subject to the proposed reporting requirements, accounting treatment, tariff sheet revisions, and other concerns with the solar and storage program and OMAG expenses treatment.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify a few things. We've had some witnesses from the company testify earlier today, and I'd like to clarify the position of the division with respect to the recommendation for approval of this project. Was the division's recommendation to capture benefits through the EBA based? Let me rephrase that question. Does the division object to the decision of the company, in this case, to build this facility on the demand side of the system, if it's the lowest cost alternative?
No.
And can you describe kind of briefly why the division recommended the EBA treatment?
The division believes that if Utah customers are going to bear the 100% of the cost of this, then they should receive the benefits from it.
Okay. And do you think that the EBA treatment that captures the market value of the kilowatt hours delivered from this project into the system captures the full benefit that is being provided by this project?
Probably not, but based on the information that we have currently, it's probably the best way to do it.
Okay. And in light of that, it is still the division's recommendation that the commission approve this project with the modifications that you've recommended in your brief opening statement?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions, and Mr. Davis is available for questions from other parties or the commission.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson? No questions? Ms. Hayes? Any questions for Mr. Davis?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solander.
A moment with your indulgence, sure. Just one question, Mr. Davis. With your recommendation regarding the STEP OMAG coming from STEP funding, is your recommendation at the end of the pilot program period that the OMAG would then be in base rates after the 5 years?
No, I think my position is that any OMAG expenses that are outside of the STEP programs that are either known or unknown at this time would not be included in base rates.
So you're saying that they would not be collected by the company after the 5-year pilot program period?
No, I don't think if the expenses, if they're outside of the projects, I don't believe they should be collected as an additional burden to the customers.
I guess what I'm asking is the ongoing OMAG cost, for instance, of the solar and battery storage program will continue after the 5-year period.
I understand your question better now. Thanks. Those would probably, in my opinion, would probably be okay to collect those.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Clark?
No questions.
Commissioner White?
Yeah, just one question. This question may be more properly addressed by Mr. Valstager Martinez, but with respect to the OMAG cost, if I recall, the office addressed us specifically with respect to the Clean Coal Technology Program. Is it the division's position that those are applicable to all STEP OMAG? I guess
Yes, that would be our position.
thanks. That's all I've got.
Okay, I see a couple of clarifying questions. First, does the proposed reporting program presented in Mr. McDougall's rebuttal satisfy your concerns with respect to reporting?
I believe so. I mean, it's kind of dynamic, so we'll see how that goes, but I think it does address, and our other witness, Mr. David Thompson, will address that a little bit as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd like to follow up, or to ask your thoughts on a question that Commissioner White asked Mr. McDougall earlier. If you look at the solar and battery storage project, how would you describe the similarities or differences between that project and something, for example, that were built in another state solely to satisfy that state's RPS or solely to satisfy a legislative directive in another state?
Like, for example, the Black Cap Solar, where it was built specifically to address a portfolio standard versus this, which is tackling a transmission problem.
Yes, for allocation purposes.
Yeah, they're different. I mean, this is the weird thing about the solar and storage is it is at the distribution level, but it is correcting a transmission problem.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have.
Can I ask one more?
Yes.
I apologize. And I think you've probably said it somewhere, Mr. Davis, but just to refresh me, the use of the Four Corners price as a reference in relation to the Gadsby replacement power, what's your view of that? Would you refresh me as to whether or not the division's position is that's appropriate, or?
I think we're okay with that. It's based on lower costs, so we made the assumption that the company would use the lowest cost, whether that's Four Corners or one of the others.
Thanks. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Jetter?
Thank you. The division would like to call and have sworn in Mr. David Thompson.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Thompson. Would you please start by stating your name and occupation for the record?
My name is David Thompson, Thomson. That's without a P. And I work for the Division of Public Utilities as a technical consultant.
Thank you. And in the course of your employment, have you had the opportunity to review the filings made by the company in this docket that are relevant to the testimony that you pre-filed?
I have.
And did you create and cause to be filed with the commission DPU witness David Thompson direct dated November 9th, 2016, along with DPU exhibit number 2.1, which is also titled Exhibit A?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections or changes you'd like to make to that?
No.
And if you were asked the same questions that were asked and answered in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would you have the same answers?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to move at this time to enter the direct testimony and Exhibit A, or also known as DPU Exhibit number 2.1 direct for Mr. Thompson into the record.
Thank you. If any party objects to that motion, please indicate to me. I'm not seeing any, so the motion's granted.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do you have a brief opening statement you'd like to
I do. Thank you.
provide? Thanks.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to summarize the Division's review of the company's proposed step accounting and certain proposed step tariff sheets and schedules. In its direct testimony, the Division accepted the company's proposed reporting plan. In his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Stephen R. McDougall provided an update on the company's step reporting plan, including the recommended additional reporting requirements supported by the company. The Division will accept the reporting plans as outlined in Mr. McDougall's direct testimony and rebuttal testimony. The Division supports the company's proposal to cancel Schedule 195 and call it Schedule 196. The Division also supports the proposed changes made by the company to Electric Service Schedules Sheet B.1 and Schedule 80. In his rebuttal testimony, Mr. McDougall accepted the Division's recommendations that the carrying charge be updated annually. He also accepted the Division's recommendation that the Schedule 195, which is now 196, include the term pilot program, and that it make note of the program period of 5 years. And the Division notes that these changes were made to the new proposed Schedule 196. The company also, during rebuttal, made a change to the cost adjustment percentages on proposed Schedule 196. They were updated to reflect the price change on November 1, 2016 for Schedule 94, Energy Balancing Account Pilot Program. It appears to the Division that the revised sheets, as discussed above, support the company's application implementing programs authorized by the STEP. Finally, the overall accounting process proposed by the company in its implementation of SB 115 has been reviewed by the Division. After review at this time, nothing came to the Division's attention that would indicate the overall accounting process as proposed by the company as improper or inadequate. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Thompson, and he's available for questions from other parties or the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solander. Commissioner White, do you have any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson.
those were the only two witnesses from the division, so I guess that completes our testimony today.
Thank you. Mr. Olson.
Thank you. The office would like to call Cheryl Murray, please.
Ms. Murray, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Could you state your name and business address and by whom you're employed?
My name is Cheryl Murray. My business address is 160 East, 300 South, Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm a utility analyst with the Office of Consumer Services.
Did you file any pre-filed direct testimony in this docket?
Yes, on November 9, 2016, I submitted 10 pages of direct testimony.
Are there any changes that you would propose to that testimony at this time?
No.
I would ask at this time that her direct testimony filed on November 9th be admitted.
Okay, if there's any objection to that motion, please indicate to me. I'm not seeing any, so the motion's granted.
Thank you. And what was the purpose of that testimony that you filed?
My testimony introduced two other office witnesses, Bela Vostog and Danny Martinez, and identified the specific areas of the company's filing to be addressed by each of them. I also addressed some of the company's proposed changes to 3 tariffs: Schedule 107, Utah Solar Incentive Program; Schedule 195, Solar Incentive Program Cost Adjustment; and Schedule 193, Demand Side Management Cost Adjustment.
And have you prepared a summary of your testimony?
Yes,
Could you please provide that summary?
certainly. In my direct testimony, I identified necessary corrections or clarifications on tariff sheets 107.4, 107.1, and 195.2. The office also noted that the company's proposed changes to Schedule 195 are so extensive, even including the tariff title, that it amounts to a completely new tariff. For this reason, as well as ease of reference, over time, the office recommended that the company should be required to cancel Schedule 195 and create a new tariff with a new schedule number for the step surcharge tariff. In the rebuttal testimony of company witness Stephen R. McDougall, filed November 23, 2016, the company agreed to all of the recommendations made by the office related to Schedule 107 and Schedule 195, including creating a new tariff, Schedule 196, for the step surcharge. In addition to the recommendations related to the tariffs discussed above, the office also noted that with the company's plan to capitalize the annual DSM costs as a DSM regulatory asset and amortize them over a 10-year period, a sizable regulatory asset will likely build up over that period. While we did not recommend any modifications to the DSM accounting provisions proposed by the company at this time, we stated that the office may address this issue in a future proceeding. In his summary, Mr. McDougall asked that the Commission specifically approve the reporting plan presented by the company. Office witnesses, Mr. Martinez and Mr. Vostog, will address reporting in their summaries. But the office requests that in its order on Phase 1 of this docket, that the Commission specify that they are not approving reporting related to issues to be heard in Phase 2. That concludes my summary.
Thank you. Ms. Murray is available for questions from the parties or the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter, do you have any questions for Ms. Murray? Ms. Hayes?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Solander? Commissioner Clark?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. White?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Mr. Olson?
Thank you. The office would now like to call Mr. Danny Martinez, ask that he be sworn.
Mr. Martinez, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Martinez, could you please state your name for the record, where you work and what your position is?
Yes, my name is Danny Martinez. I am a utility analyst for the Office of Consumer Services. My business address is 160 East, 300 South, Salt Lake City, Utah, A4111.
And as part of your duties as a utility analyst, did you have occasion to review the STEP filing under consideration here today?
Yes,
And as part of that, did you file or cause to be filed direct testimony on November 9th, 2016?
yes,
And did you file or cause to be filed rebuttal testimony on November 23rd, 2016?
yes.
Are there any changes that you'd make at that time? Any changes to the testimony you would like to make at this time?
No.
I would ask that the testimony, that the direct and rebuttal testimony be admitted this time.
Okay, if any party objects to that motion, please indicate to me. I'm not seeing any, so that motion's granted.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, have you provided a summary for the commission at this time?
Yes, I have.
Could you please proceed?
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. My testimony addresses the Phase 1 clean coal projects related to NOx emissions reduction and the Gadsby curtailment program. Since the Commission's scheduling order allows for live rebuttal testimony, I will include brief response to the company's rebuttal testimony in this summary. With respect to the Phase 1 clean coal projects, the office raised concerns regarding reporting requirements and OMAG expenses. In rebuttal testimony, the company proposed more specific reporting for all of the STEP programs. The company's proposal adequately addresses the office's concerns regarding reporting requirements and addresses the office's reporting recommendations. Regarding OMAG expenses, the office agrees with the division that those costs need to be identified and quantified and included in the company's STEP budget. The office contends that the company should reserve STEP funds from funds authorized by the legislature to be used for OMAG expenses rather than seek recovery outside of the STEP line item charge for the years during which STEP is in place. With respect to the Gadsby curtailment program, my testimony indicated that the company did not sufficiently explain how the value of the curtailment replacement power cost is calculated and why the Four Corners hub would be appropriate to use as a market proxy. I further recommended that the Commission approve the Gadsby curtailment program without specifically authorizing the method of calculation for replacement power costs. Instead, the office recommended that the Commission require additional supporting information in the annual EBA filing if the company seeks STEP funds for Gadsby curtailment in that year. In rebuttal testimony, Mr. McDougall opposed this recommendation. He indicated that determining actual replacement power costs would be burdensome and potentially controversial, and recommended that the Commission approve the use of the formula he presented and the Four Corners hub as the appropriate market proxy to use in replacement cost power calculations. However, Mr. McDougall also offered to include in future reporting requirements a justification in a future EBA filing if the company proposes to use a different hub in the future. He also agreed to use a different market hub as proxy if ordered by the Commission. My testimony did not oppose the replacement power cost estimate or the use of a market proxy. Rather, I was concerned that the filing was confusing and did not sufficiently explain the process. The detailed explanations were all obtained through the discovery process. To be clear, the office agrees with Mr. McDougall that the formula provided in response to OCS 3.4 and his rebuttal testimony is a reasonable estimation for curtailment replacement power costs. However, the office contends that insufficient evidence has been presented in this proceeding to determine the appropriate hub to be used as a market proxy. Further, it is clear that the company would like to be able to justify a change in what hub is used, if appropriate, in future years. For these reasons, the office continues to recommend that the Commission require the company to justify what market should be used as a market proxy if it requests STEP funds to reimburse Gadsby curtailment costs in a future EBA proceeding. To clarify our position, the office supports the Commission approving the Gadsby curtailment program and the general method of calculation of replacement power cost, but requests that the issue of the appropriate hub be addressed in each relevant future EBA proceeding. The office still recommends that the Commission require an additional filing requirement for the company in its EBA filing if it seeks STEP funds for the Gadsby curtailment in that year. That's the conclusion of my summary.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez is available for questions from the parties or the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter? Ms. Hayes?
No questions.
Ms. Gardner?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solander? Commissioner White?
Just, so my understanding, and that was helpful. On the power cost is that office is not necessarily opposed to the right. Not that they want actual costs. Just don't give a plus.
That's correct, yes.
Commissioner Clark?
I want to express appreciation also for the clarification. Because I had a few questions that I can eliminate now, but I am still interested to know or understand better the extent to which the office specifically objects to Four Corners as the identified market proxy hub.
We didn't, my intent was not to object specifically to the Four Corners. We just didn't understand why that specific hub was chosen over other hubs that could have been. And so that was the intent of trying to figure out which one would be the appropriate hub. We didn't see that in the application by the company, and so we asked Discovery on that, and that's where we got our response to that. In one of the responses, they said basically it was just a geographical proximity.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Just one follow-up to that.
Yes.
In your opinion, does that provide sufficient certainty to the utility to make curtailment decisions if there's not certainty on which of the three hubs might be the proxy in the next EVA case?
I think the choice of the hub, given the formula that the company put forth as described in Mr. McDougall's testimony as well as my own, that there needs to be a market proxy in place for the calculations to work. Again, we're not concerned which one it is as long as it's one that is prudent for determining those costs. I think in my testimony I indicated that we would presume that would be the least cost purchase of power that would be used in that calculation.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. So thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you.
Mr. Olson?
Thank you. The office would like to call Mr. Bela Vostok, please.
Mr. Vostok, do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Vostok, could you please state your name for the record, your place of employment, and what you do, what your position is?
Yes, my name is Bela Vostok. I'll spell that for the court reporter. B-E-L-A. Last name Vostok, V like in Victor, A-S-T-A-G. I'm a utility analyst for the Utah Office of Consumer Services, and my business address is here in this building, 160 East, 300 South.
And as part of your work as a utility analyst for the Office of Consumer Services, did you have occasion to review the filing under consideration, the step filing under consideration here today?
Yes.
And did you file or cause to be filed direct testimony on November 9th, 2016, and rebuttal testimony on November 23rd, 2016 in response to that filing?
Yes.
Would you make it, are there any corrections or revisions you'd like to make at this time?
I have no changes to my testimony.
The office would move that those filings be admitted into evidence at this time.
Okay, thank you. If anyone objects to that motion, please indicate to me. And the motion's granted.
Mr. Vostok, have you prepared a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please provide the summary now?
Yes. My testimony in this proceeding has addressed the company's proposed solar and energy storage technology project, which I usually refer to as the solar battery project. This project falls under the Innovative Utility Programs section of the Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan, or STEP Act. So in other words, the solar battery project is a research and development, or an R&D project. Research and development projects are not always successful, and this is a risk that one assumes when pursuing an R&D project. However, the risk is worth taking if this solar battery R&D project gives the company some knowledge that will enable it to provide service to its customers in the future in a more effective and less costly manner. Utah ratepayers are funding the entire solar battery project. Therefore, given the inherent risks of an R&D project, the office believes that the solar battery project would only be in the interest of Utah ratepayers if the R&D knowledge could be used for the benefit of ratepayers in the future. Unfortunately, the office sees a barrier to this technology being used in the future. This barrier is caused by how the costs of such a project would be allocated. Because the company's solar battery project is on the distribution side of the system, all of the costs would be assigned to Utah, even though the project is solving a problem on the transmission line. The costs associated with transmission assets, as we know, are allocated among all states that Rocky Mountain Power's parent company, Pacificor, serves. As I described in my written testimony, the Utah allocated cost of a transmission solution to the transmission line problem are significantly lower than the Utah allocated costs of the solar battery project. The solar battery project that is at issue today would be funded according to the STEP Act, but in the future, an implementation of this technology would have its cost allocated through a different process, usually a general rate case, including a multi-state protocol or MSP type process. Therefore, the office sees cost allocation as a barrier to the future use of this R&D knowledge, because a state jurisdiction may not approve another solar battery project where all the costs are state assigned, when an alternative transmission-based solution would be cheaper because its costs were allocated among all Pacificor states. Therefore, the office does not recommend that the commission authorize this project unless the company can propose a solution to this cost allocation problem, or this barrier. This cost allocation method that they would propose, or the solution to the cost allocation problem, would need to be incorporated in any future implementation of the solar battery technology. If the proposed solar battery project is authorized by the Commission, the office supports the concept from the Utah Division of Public Utilities that the value or benefit of the energy from the solar facility be credited back to Utah through the EBA. Also, if the project is authorized, the office does not oppose Utah Clean Energy's proposal for a Blue Sky grant program based on the output of a Blue Sky funded solar facility. That is, as long as the energy from the solar facility is valued at the company's avoided cost, and also the cost of running the grant program are charged to the Blue Sky program. And that concludes my summary statement.
Mr. Vostog, as you know, the order allowed for the possibility of live SIR rebuttal. Would you like to provide any of that at this time?
Yes. Today I'd like to respond to Rocky Mountain Power witness Stephen R. McDougall. Mr. McDougall's rebuttal testimony was filed on November 23rd.
Thank you. Would you please proceed then with the SIR rebuttal?
Yes. In his rebuttal testimony, Mr. McDougall states that the company does not agree with the office's approach in evaluating project costs on a state allocated basis. he says that the company analyzes all transmission and distribution investment options on a total company basis. This implies that the company is regularly making transmission versus distribution investment decisions, like the one it proposes to make for this solar battery project, without consideration of the cost allocation impacts on the various jurisdictions. This raises a red flag for the office and indicates that in the future, state jurisdictions need to devote more resources in future rate cases to evaluating the company's investments in situs-assigned distribution assets. Furthermore, going forward, the company should be required to provide a comprehensive explanation of how decisions are made for both transmission and distribution investments, including how it evaluates the trade-offs between a transmission versus a distribution solution. This explanation should also explore how these investment decisions distort or do not distort the multi-state protocol or MSP allocation process. In another area, if the solar battery project is to be authorized, Mr. McDougall also states in his rebuttal testimony that the energy benefits that Utah would receive from the project should be calculated using the same methodology as for the Black Cap solar project in Oregon. However, the company does not provide sufficient detail in this docket for parties to understand how the Black Cap benefits are calculated and credited back to Oregon. If the Commission authorizes this project and approves such a benefit crediting program, the Commission should require the company to submit a compliance filing. In this filing, it should show how the Oregon system crediting system is done for the Black Cap project, and allow parties to submit comments on the company's filing to ensure that the accounting is done in a way that properly credits Utah ratepayers. Finally, Mr. McDougall implies in his rebuttal testimony that a demand-side management or a DSM program could be implemented in an area to solve a transmission line loading problem. And he notes that DSM program costs are situs assigned. However, this is not a fair analogy to the proposed solar battery project because DSM programs reduce load in the state that they are implemented in, which in turn reduces the state's share of system costs that are allocated based on load. That concludes my rebuttal, my rebuttal testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Vostog is available for questions from the parties or the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter, any questions for Mr. Vostog? No questions. Thank you. Ms. Hayes?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Gardner?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solander?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Vostok.
Good morning.
You would agree, wouldn't you, with Mr. Marks's assertion that if the company is incented either way, one way or another, to make system or situs investments, that it could lead to suboptimal planning decisions?
There is that possibility, yes.
Now, you were here when Mr. Marks was testifying earlier?
Yes.
So you heard his hypothetical about the same exact solar and energy storage project being built in Idaho instead of in Utah?
Yes.
Now, if that project was built on the distribution side in Idaho, would the office accept if 43% of the cost of that project was assigned to Utah and recommend that the company be allowed recovery of 43% of the total cost of that project in its next rate case?
Well, that hypothetical is really impossible to answer without a lot more detail.
No, it's the exact same project that we're presenting today.
Well, if there was a process in place as we propose, for future projects, then of course we would agree because we would have been involved in the process to determine how that would work.
So you're saying that you would support in the future if transmission level and if distribution investments to solve a transmission problem were made in Idaho, you would support 43% of the cost being assigned to Utah?
Yes, a good example would be there are several expensive transmission projects being proposed in Idaho and Wyoming and Utah. Gateway comes to mind. And if there was a less expensive distribution solution, then we would see, merit in postponing or not investing in billions of dollars of transmission. Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, if I may. Mr. Vostog, in your response to Mr. Solander's question, you spoke about the process. Is that a proposed process that the office is suggesting a comprehensive review of all facts and circumstances regarding any of those kinds of decisions that would go on in the future, with an opportunity to review and evaluate the specific facts and circumstances of those decisions that are made in other jurisdictions?
Yes, I would say that would be the beginning of the process, so we can understand what the factors are, and then of course, out of that should come some method or way to handle these distribution versus transmission decisions where state allocation is a problem, and where a state such as Idaho may not approve a solar battery project when it's going to shoulder 100% of the costs when its allocated cost would be 6%. So,
and to your knowledge, a robust process as you're describing now is not in existence at this time.
No, it's not. This seems to be this is new. A new area of analysis.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Any recross, Mr. Sullivan?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner White?
I just wanted to circle back on this concept of, I guess, the compensation for the generation from the solar panels. Is that, are you, and maybe I'm confusing this, are you talking about like the gross generation from those panels, or is that netted out for what's utilized for station power or the batteries? Or
honestly, we haven't delved into the details. We agree on a high level, at a high level on the concept that Utah Clean Energy proposes. We were just concerned that the value of the grant program may be overvalued if it was based on a retail type rate.
And the avoided cost, I mean, is that something that you would consider just as a, like the Schedule 37 feed-in or Schedule 38 or a separate proceeding to determine whatever the avoided cost of that specific?
I suggested in my testimony, since this facility would be of a size that falls under Schedule 37, that we could just use Schedule 37 as simply as the price.
And earlier you were discussing the concept, I think I heard you correctly, about, this is an R&D project, and tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, is the concept you were, is the concept that because there's going to be lessons learned and potential intellectual property that are flow from this project, that if Utah were to pay for that they should somehow be able to capture, or is that going to be a benefit to all states, and so there should be some kind of inverse relationship between those two?
No, the concept was, R&D projects are, unknown whether or not they will work. So if we are going to invest Utah funds, we should at least have the opportunity to use the technology, the knowledge of the technology that we've gained from such a project to benefit the entire system, to benefit either Utah again or other jurisdictions. And we're just concerned that if this cost allocation question comes up in other states, they may not approve of such a project, and we've lost the benefit of that knowledge in that case.
One final question. I asked this, and Chair LeVar asked it in a different way earlier, but I guess I'm just I'm wondering if you have a position on whether there's a distinction between this type of project that flows out of a legislative directive and something like, for example, like an RPS related project from another state. Is there a distinction, or is that not a factor in how projects should be allocated within the system?
We really didn't consider it from that perspective. In my opinion, I think an RPS project would be a different type of RPS-related project, because it would be a mandated policy-related project to meet a specific goal. And in this case, the choice of an innovative technology project, there are potentially many candidates for this project, not just this project.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further, so thank you, Mr. Vastag. Mr. Olson, do you have anything else?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if you could indulge one question I have follow-up for Rocky Mountain Power before we move to Ms. Wright's testimony. While I see that Mr. Campbell's still in the room, I don't know if this question would be best for him or Mr. McDougall, but I would just like to ask the Rocky Mountain Power if, based on Mr. Martinez's clarifications I think we heard in his testimony, what your position is on the Gadsby curtailment with respect to certainty, if there were certainty of the use of a proxy, but not certainty until a following EBA docket of which of the three proxies were going to be used.
I think Mr. McDougall, I don't know if you want to recall him to the stand.
If you just answer from the stand.
I think we'd be okay determining the proxy, but what I don't think we'd be okay with is making it an issue that we have to relitigate every EBA. One of the things we would like is certainty to know that we're using a certain proxy, and that not every time it's the lowest of the three, or we're not picking and choosing. We would prefer to have the certainty of a known proxy, and we would prefer for it to be determined in this proceeding. But if it's not, as long as it is going to be one proxy and not change every time, we would be okay with it.
Thank you. That answers my question. Any other follow-ups while we're doing this?
If you don't
Commissioner
mind,
Clark, yes.
and I appreciate, Chair LeVar, that you've raised this, because I wanted to pursue the same general subject area. Could you explain why, or what challenges would exist for the company if the process was simply that when there's a curtailment, that you then look to the lowest of, say, the three hubs that have been mentioned, Mid-Sea and Four Corners and Palo Verde, and use the lowest of those at that time? Are there technical challenges there that I'd like to understand if they
No, there are not technical challenges to that, because we know the prices of all three. But in reality, from a planning perspective and from an actual perspective, what we're saying is let's use a market price hub as the proxy. If we assume that we're getting the replacement power from Mid-Sea or from Four Corners, I think we ought to be consistent, because the system's going to operate the same, and it's going to pull replacement from that same hub all the time. It's not going to say, well, let's always use the lowest. There's transmission constraints, there's other issues. And that's why we believe Four Corners is the best, is its proximity to the load that we're using, its proximity to Gadsby. And that's why I think we ought to use one hub. We shouldn't change back and forth, because in reality, we're not changing the way we serve the load.
Yeah, that helps me understand so it's not just a matter of, your decision as to where you go for the replacement power isn't going to be driven solely by what the price is at the hub. There's a number of factors that you'll be considering. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, because we're continually trading at multiple hubs, not just at, at one hub, and we do it because of constraints of where we can find the power.
Thank you. Yeah, that concludes my questions.
Commissioner White?
One final follow-up on that concept. Is there a reason that the company couldn't utilize a blended proxy rate? In other words, I mean, if there's really no specific, it sounds like in the testimony there was the choice between Palo Verde, Mid-C, and Four Corners, and if you're just looking for consistency, would that be more complicated, or is that less complicated than just picking one of those three?
I had not thought of that option, but there would not be a lot of additional complexity. We would just have to throw the three prices into a spreadsheet and take a third of each or whatever the proposed methodology is. Like I said, we would like to have it determined ahead of time so that we don't have that fight in every EBA saying, well, let's use this proxy this year and another proxy in the next year. But I don't see there would be a lot of additional work to putting all three and taking an average.
That's all for
That's all the questions I've got. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McDougall. Ms. Hayes?
Thank you. Utah Clean Energy will call Sarah Wright to the stand, and she needs to be sworn.
Thank you. Ms. Wright, do you swear to tell the truth? Thank you.
Good morning. Will you please state your name, position, and business address for the record?
My name is Sarah Wright. I'm the executive director and founder of Utah Clean Energy.
Is your mic on? Or is it might just be my hearing?
Doesn't seem to be from where we're sitting. It should be.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get that? Okay, thanks.
Did you file direct testimony in this docket on November 9th, 2016, marked as Utah Clean Energy Exhibit 1.0?
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, is everything in your testimony true and correct?
Yes.
At this point, I would like to move the admission of this testimony.
Thank you. Please indicate to me if there's any objection to that motion. The motion's granted.
Thank you. Will you please provide a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes. Utah Clean Energy is generally supportive of Rocky Mountain Power's pilot project to utilize solar and storage to avoid distribution and transmission upgrades. We believe that in addition to the deferral benefits, the project will help the company and others understand the potential of these technologies. We support this study to further utilize non-wires alternatives and options in transmission and distribution system planning and maintenance. So while Utah Clean Energy is supportive of the project, we offer some recommendations to for the Commission's consideration with regard to the solar component of the project. First, because solar PV is an extremely cost-effective resource, there's likely no need to utilize Blue Sky funds to pay for this project. I've been involved in shaping and the early promotion of the Blue Sky program since 2001. And to date, the benefits from the program have flowed to Blue Sky customers or grant recipients that were deemed worthy of the Blue Sky grant project. The company's proposal to have the benefits flow to all ratepayers is a significant deviation from the Blue Sky program. However, should the Commission authorize the use of Blue Sky funds, I recommend that a grant program, similar to the workings of the Solar Subscriber Program, be developed. The main differences being, one, that the program is funded by Blue Sky funding, two, that customers receive a bill credit based upon solar energy rate as determined in the Solar Subscriber Program, and that three, the benefits flow to recipients deemed worthy by the Blue Sky Grant Program, such as food banks, homeless shelters, etc. Specifically, I propose that the value of the energy credit established in the solar subscriber be utilized as an offset on grant recipients' bills. And I understand that this portion of my proposal was not very clear. So I'll try to clarify that now before providing live rebuttal. In my proposal, I gave the example of a 200 kilowatt hour monthly block that could be awarded to community service organizations. And rather than offsetting 200 kilowatt hours of usage directly, a set value for those 200 kilowatt hours as established in the solar subscriber docket would be used as to offset the energy portion of a customer's bills. So in the subscriber solar docket, an energy value was used as a component of the solar generation block charge. Also included in that charge was marketing and administrative costs. Given that my proposal is a grant program, it is not appropriate to include a credit for those marketing and administrative charges in the bill credit. So my proposal is to compensate grant recipients with an energy value associated with the kilowatts generated by their granted capacity of the solar PV facility. I know this is probably confusing, but as an offset to the energy portion of the grantee's rate as determined by the solar subscriber program. And then finally, in my direct testimony, I made a statement about the importance of using this pilot project as an opportunity to learn about allocating costs associated with distributed or non-wires transmission alternatives across jurisdictional lines. And that's been a common theme today.
Does that conclude your summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Did parties file rebuttals to your direct testimony?
Yes. The division, yes. The division in the office did not oppose my proposal for a Blue Sky grant program and provided additional questions and recommendations. The company does not support my recommendations.
Will you review the division's response to your proposal?
Yes. The division's primary recommendation with regard to the solar facility is that the market value of the energy output flow to Utah ratepayers via the EBA. This recommendation would ensure that benefits flow to Utah ratepayers. The division highlighted some additional details that, if addressed in my proposal, could permit both the division's and Utah Clean Energy's recommendations to be implemented. First, the division proposes allocating Blue Sky grants based on capacity rather than energy. Using the actual energy output to allocate bill offsets proportionately to grant recipients. In that way, customers cannot be credited for more energy than is actually produced by the facility. This is similar to how the solar subscriber is structured for customers with interval meters now, where customers receive 1 kilowatt blocks and their bills are offset by the actual energy generated by the solar facility. Second, the division proposes that grants have a limited duration. The division notes that grant recipients under Utah Clean Energy's proposal are not leveraging their own funds, unlike Blue Sky grant recipients, nor are they responsible for ongoing operations, maintenance, or capital expenses. The division proposes the length of the pilot period as the duration of the grant period.
What is go ahead.
Finally, the division makes some additional comparisons between the subscriber solar and Utah Clean Energy's Blue Sky grant program.
Apologies. Would you please respond to the division's recommendations?
Well, firstly, I sincerely appreciate the division's thoughtful recommendations on my proposal. I'm not opposed to allocating grants based upon capacity and offsetting bills based on actual generation. It is an appropriate way to protect ratepayers from the potential negative impact of granting more energy than the PV system produces. However, I am concerned that it would increase the administrative burden of the program, and I think there's a simple way to decrease administrative burden while simultaneously avoiding oversubscribing the PV system. The grant program could withhold capacity from the system, say 10% of the PV system capacity, thereby providing a cushion to protect ratepayers in the event.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This isn't rebutting. This is direct testimony that wasn't filed as direct testimony. This isn't rebutting any assertion made by the division. It's just additional detail that could have been included in Ms. Wright's direct testimony.
I'm happy to, if
I'm
you
gonna-
don't want my ideas, I'm happy not to share them.
Well, let's see if Ms. Hayes wants to respond to the objection.
Well, it's a fair objection. It is a sincere response to, a sincere attempt to respond to the division's rebuttal testimony. I will leave it to the commission to decide.
Let me ask Mr. Jetter to weigh in on this.
You know, I don't think that the division has a ton of passion on the finer nuance of this, and I guess this is something that I think would show up in a STIR rebuttal potentially. So I don't think I have any objection to Ms. Wright providing her proposal, to the extent that it's, I guess, limited to a response to our critique or suggestions. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I suppose my real answer is we don't object to the question.
Mr. Olson or Ms. Gardner, do either of you have any input on any interest in this objection?
No, we have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Olson?
I believe that it seems to be a logical consequence of STIR rebuttal to provide alternatives, so we would not object to the continuation of that.
Okay, I think the objection is well noted. This does tend to seem like the type of thing that generally would be allowed in written STIR rebuttal. Typically, the kind of thing we typically see. So I think we'll allow a little more leeway on this issue. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Or Ms. Wright.
Thank you. So with this cushion, if the PV system generates energy in excess of the granted energy, then the market value could flow through the EBA to all ratepayers. And this would ensure that the benefits stay in Utah. And regarding the division's recommendation to set a time limit on the grant, I'm also not opposed to this recommendation. However, given that the project will not come online until 2018, I recommend setting a duration longer than the STEP pilot period, perhaps 5 to 10 years from the online date of the project, with a review of the grant program scheduled as part of the Blue Sky program, and a determination of whether the program should be continued with modification or discontinued.
Will you please describe the office's response to your proposal?
Yes, the office sees merit in the concept of using the output of the Blue Sky funded project for the benefit of the Blue Sky program instead of for the benefit of all ratepayers. However, the office is concerned with the complexity of the program and the potential administrative costs, as well as whether the compensation level is too high. As I indicated before, my initial proposal was not clear. The office and the division responded as though I was proposing a kilowatt-hour for kilowatt-hour credit as compensation. The office proposed compensation at Schedule 37 avoided cost rates. The office also proposed that administrative costs be charged to the Blue Sky program.
What is your response to the office's recommendations?
I support charging the administrative cost to the Blue Sky program. And perhaps the simplest and least costly way to administer this program would be an annual bill credit awarded at the beginning of the year based upon the projected energy output associated with the awarded capacity grant. A credit based on the determined value of the energy could be applied to the grant recipient's bill and thus carried forward every month for which the value remains. This greatly decreases the administrative burden. And it may take multiple months to use this credit. And with regard to the matter of compensation, there are currently 3 options before the Commission. Utah Clean Energy's proposal to use the energy value that was recently established in the solar subscriber docket. DPU's proposal to use the market value of the solar output, or OCS's proposal to value using Schedule 37 avoided costs. Given that the project does not come online until 2018, if the Commission finds merit in Utah Clean Energy's recommendation to create a Blue Sky grant program for the energy output of the solar facility, I believe there's time to evaluate these options.
Will you describe the company's response to UCE's proposal?
Yes. Steve McDougall, in his rebuttal testimony, raises 2 primary concerns. First, Mr. McDougall argues that the energy generated by the solar facility is not excess generation that can be counted on or for use in a grant program because it is needed to reduce loading on the distribution circuit. Second, Mr. McDougall argues that the grant program will create an administrative burden.
What is your response?
With regard to the administrative burden, I believe it is appropriate to charge the Blue Sky program with the cost of administering this grant program. The Blue Sky program already has the infrastructure for managing the grant program, and the subscriber solar program already has a billing infrastructure. And regarding Mr. McDougall's other assertion that the PV system is not excess generation, I accept and applaud that the energy from the solar PV system will be used in conjunction with battery storage to provide system benefits to avoid transmission and distribution upgrades in the project area. However, the fact that the energy from the PV system will work in conjunction with batteries to reduce line loading is not mutually exclusive to providing benefits to Utah ratepayers through the Blue Sky program, I'm not sure if I articulated that well, is not mutually exclusive to the energy having value for use in the Blue Sky grant program. So if you consider a subscriber solar project, if it's built on an area of the system that provides benefits and reduces line loading, that isn't mutually exclusive to providing those energy benefits to the subscriber solar program. So they're very much two different issues. And my proposal is that the energy benefits funded by Blue Sky customers be conveyed to deserving grantees, such as food banks, homeless shelters, et cetera, through a grant program operated from the Blue Sky program, and that they are not, because they're providing line benefits and system benefits, doesn't mean that the energy benefits can't flow to Blue Sky grant program.
What is your recommendation to the commission based on your review of the parties' positions?
I recommend that if Blue Sky funds are used for this project, that the commission approve the creation of a Blue Sky grant program for the energy output associated with the solar facility. The grant should be awarded the same way other Blue Sky grants are awarded, but with grant recipients receiving bill credits based on the value of the energy produced from their granted capacity allocation. Utah Clean Energy recommends that the energy value be based upon the energy value in the commission-approved solar subscriber program. Grants can be time-limited, but should not last less than 5 years from the online date of the solar facility, with a review prior to the expiration date of the grant within the Blue Sky docket to determine whether the grant program should continue in its current form, be modified, or end. Grants could be awarded based on capacity allocations, but bill credits should be allocated based on either actual generation or estimated generation. If there is concern that using the estimated generation may result in granting more energy than is produced by the system, the program could limit its grant allocation to a portion of the system capacity, reserving a cushion to protect ratepayers in the event that the system does not produce as projected. Administrative costs should be charged to the Blue Sky program, and I recommend that the commission set up a technical conference or Blue Sky work group meeting to receive comments on this program, elements and design and compensation prior to the online date of the solar facility.
Do you have any other recommendations for the commission?
Yes. I recommend that the commission host a technical conference on distribution-sited, non-wires, transmission alternatives, and cost allocation issues. Given that one of the main objectives of this pilot program is educational, it would be a missed opportunity not to try to learn how to replicate projects without stumbling over this critical cost allocation issue.
Does that conclude your summary, rebuttal testimony and conclusions?
Yes, thank you very much.
Ms. Wright is now available for questioning.
Thank you. Ms. Gardner, do you have any questions for Ms. Wright?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olson, do you?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solander?
Yes, thank you. Would you agree that your proposed grant program is essentially setting up an off-site or virtual net metering program?
I would disagree. It's very similar to your subscriber solar program.
But the energy generated in one area by this project would then be used to offset usage by other parties.
Just as it is in your solar subscriber program.
Who would determine who receives the benefits of your grant program?
The Blue Sky program has a current grant program, and I'm not sure how you decide on the grant recipients, but a number of applications are received every year, and the company, I assume, unless you have a committee that works with you, determines the grant recipients.
Do you have any idea who you would want to be eligible for this program?
It could be very similar to the grant recipients that you now give. Community organizations, schools apply, churches apply, a number of different. And as a company, you could set up a steering committee to decide. I think that food banks and, homeless shelters would be an excellent idea.
So more administrative costs.
No, it's just a matter of applying, just as they do now, they apply for grants, and the company reviews those proposals, and they make a decision on who should receive those grants.
Isn't this awfully similar to a repackaging of the USIP program?
No, but do you understand the grant program that you currently have for the Blue Sky program?
Yes, I participate in it.
No, the Blue Sky grant program.
Yes, I participate in the evaluation committee is what I meant.
Okay.
So yes.
I don't see it as a repackaging. I see that it is a grant program, but the companies are not putting the solar on site. You are granting the energy just as you would through the subscriber solar.
How is there then a public benefit to the solar and energy storage program if the benefits are repackaged to benefit a select group of customers?
The benefits of this, the main benefits of this is a small solar project. It's 650 kilowatts. The main benefits are in the transmission deferral.
Are you aware of whether the commission has ever previously ordered the company to implement a program that it didn't propose and didn't support and for which the costs are totally speculative?
I'm not aware. I've been involved with the Blue Sky program for a long time, and you have done grant programs for a long time.
Thank you.
Is that all you have, Ms. Sloan? Thank you. Ms. Hayes, any redirect?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner White, anything for?
Yeah, just two quick questions. You may have described this, but I may have missed it. So
No, it's confusing. I'm sorry.
No, this it was helpful. With respect to the output, were you saying you're talking like gross generation, or are you talking like a kind of a net excess based upon what's the generation left after the use of the batteries, or what's the?
There are two different issues. I would say gross, you would probably do something for line losses, to remove line losses, but it would be the gross generation, because this project is providing dual benefits. Energy is a secondary benefit, whereas the primary benefit, as Mr. Marks explained, is to reduce the peak loading on the grid. And so it's providing that benefit, but then there's also an added energy benefit. So it's just a matter of, because you cited that project in a location, it provides benefits. Just like if you built a solar subscriber project in a location that provided grid benefits, those kilowatt hours would still be available for the solar subscriber program.
And then one other just question, and I understand you probably don't have the calculations readily available, but I mean, what are we talking about in terms of, I know there's three different concepts, Schedule 37 and some other compensation. Is there any kind of rough estimate of what the total value based upon your gross generation of what that would be? I mean, are we, in terms of dollars?
I could probably quickly do it. I looked at the total in my direct testimony. I calculated the total output, I believe. Sophie, if you're looking at it, and you can point me to the right page.
My screen just went to sleep.
Okay. So the PV watts calculator online, I just did a simple online calculation that showed the entire system would generate about 1,118,000 kilowatt hours a year, and divide that annual output by 12. And let's see, sorry, I have to follow through my math again. we would have approximately 466 200 kilowatt hour blocks. I didn't really, so we would multiply that times whatever value that the commission determines. The value in the subscriber solar program is, I think, part of a confidential docket, so I probably shouldn't say that right now. Voided cost, Schedule 37, I'm not sure where that lands right now, but you would multiply 466, and if someone has a calculator, they could do this, times 200 times the different values. So it's not a huge value, but it could provide really meaningful benefits to organizations in Utah. And it would also align, I think when people buy into the solar, I mean, right now, the Blue Sky program is way overpriced. And when we filed our last comments, we said if the benefits still flow to the community, we're okay with it being overpriced. But if the benefits are not going to flow to the community, I think we need to reduce the Blue Sky price to maybe 50 cents per 100 kilowatt hour block. But sorry, I don't have the math, and I don't have a calculator in front of me, but.
Don't look at me to do that.
That's what Sophie says to me.
I guess the final question is putting aside, I guess, the philosophical benefits versus, who should be entitled to it. Is there anything that, in your opinion, is contrary to the Blue Sky program as, written by law, rule, et cetera, or tariff that would prohibit the use of the funds for this project?
For the project?
Yeah.
So there's nothing by law, and I was involved in the changes that allowed them to do demonstration projects or do projects, but it was, and I guess I failed in not saying that then those benefits should flow to Blue Sky customers or grant programs, because, so the law definitely allows it, it's just a big deviation from what Blue Sky customers have supported in the past.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anything else either.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So Ms. Hayes?
No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wright.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gardner?
And before I call my witness, would anybody object to me moving so that my witness's back isn't to me during direct?
I'm sorry.
Would anybody object to me moving during direct so that my witness's back isn't to me?
Oh, no, I think we've got two chairs right here.
Thank you.
Let's see. Mr. Wilson, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning. Will you please state your name, position, and business address for the record?
My name is Kenneth Wilson. I'm representing Western Resource Advocates. I'm an engineering fellow, and my office address is 2260 Baseline Road, Boulder, Colorado.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, did you file direct testimony as well as your CV in this docket on November 9th, 2016, marked as WRA Exhibit 1.0 and 1.1, respectively?
Yes, I did.
And to the best of your knowledge, is everything in your testimony and CV still true and correct?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to move for the admission of Mr. Wilson's testimony and CV into evidence at this time.
Thank you. If any party objects to that, please indicate to me. And I'm not seeing any, so the motion's granted.
Mr. Wilson, at this time, will you please summarize your direct testimony for the commission?
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, I'd like to focus on some technical issues in this case. I find the proposal by Rocky Mountain Power to be very solid technically. This is a typical non-wire solution to a voltage problem, and I have been testifying in Nevada, Colorado, and Arizona on similar proposals by utilities there. We find these to be very reasonable first steps for utilities to start testing battery storage technology. While that technology is still a little expensive today, we believe that within a few years it will be more economical than typical wired solutions. And you've heard some testimony about non-wire solutions, but I will just add to my testimony on that non-wire solutions are being looked at in states all across the country. This is not a new solution. These technologies have been in use for 5 or 6 years. Each utility really needs to get some experience with this technology to see how it works, how do they manage, how do they operate a battery storage system by itself, with solar, with other distributed generation, because each utility system is different. And I think maybe one misperception, non-wire solutions can solve problems that are strictly in the distribution grid. They don't have to be related to transmission. You can avoid putting in a new transformer at a substation. You can avoid reconductoring feeders, which are totally in the distribution side. So I don't find it rings true to say that this would always involve an allocation issue because it would always be on the transmission side. There are many examples across the country where these non-wires, battery storage, and solar solutions are being used at the substation and feeder level and have nothing to do with transmission. So I wanted to clear that up a bit. We find this a very good use for STEP funds. We think that this type of pilot project was contemplated and that the R&D purpose for this is quite sound. As I mentioned, the company needs to get experience. It's like you have a new type of car. You need to drive it. You need to drive it on your roads in your neighborhood to see how it works. How does it work for you? And that's very important. And as I said, this will be an important choice that the utility and the commission needs to have in its portfolio of solutions for distribution problems, for transmission problems, for mixes of those problems. And I would hate to see an allocation issue stop a good project like this. I've been involved in R&D for 40 years in a variety of technologies and have evaluated hundreds of projects, and I would say this is a very good example of what we should be promoting as choices for utilities. Excuse me. One other thing that I mentioned in my testimony that I think needs to be added to the conversation are the additional benefits that a battery storage system can bring to the customers in Utah. While the company is proposing this project strictly to solve a voltage problem, as you heard in testimony earlier today, the battery will only be used a couple of months a year for that purpose. That leaves a large part of the year available to use this battery storage system to solve other problems and essentially to make money for the customers of Utah. Two examples of that are energy shifting. In a month like April, when there's no voltage problem, they could use the battery to store up excess energy at night and then discharge it in the daytime when they would have had to add additional generation into the mix. So that's a definite economic advantage. And the second advantage or example is frequency regulation. The company has to provide a steady frequency of 60 hertz, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to the second, to the millisecond, really. And a battery system has been shown to be very good at helping to balance the frequency on the system. And what I'm saying is that once the company learns how to use this system to solve the voltage problem, they can start using the same battery to get economic benefits for the customers. And that will be very important for this project, but more so in the future when batteries are much cheaper and will be in the running to replace peakers, to replace burning fuel wastefully just to do this frequency balancing. You can store the excess energy and ramp the battery up and down and balance the frequency. So there are a lot of benefits to this project. that I see, and it is typical of other projects that I'm supporting in other states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does that conclude your summary of your direct testimony?
It does.
And did any parties file rebuttal to your direct testimony?
They did not.
Do you have any other recommendations that you'd like to share with the commission today?
I think all of my recommendations are in my direct testimony.
And finally, does that conclude your summary and conclusions?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Wilson is now available for questions from the parties as well as from the commission.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes, any questions from you?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter? I have no questions. Mr. Olson?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Solander? Thank you. Commissioner White?
No question, thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, I have a question or two. If you're conversant enough with battery technology to take these on, I'd be grateful for your thoughts. The additional uses of the battery capacity that you described, avoiding having to transmit certain amounts of energy to that area because it's been produced and stored and is available in the months and days when it's not doing its primary or fulfilling its primary purpose. Is that going to affect the longevity of the battery's life in any material way, as far as you know? In other words, if this battery were used 10 months a year instead of 2, have we reduced the life of the battery by 5% or not at all, or 50%, or?
That's an excellent question, because this is an issue that utilities and commissions and battery providers are looking at across the country, and electric vehicles is a good example of this. It turns out that if you use battery storage for instance, frequency regulation, what you're going to do is set it kind of in the half filled, and sometimes you have to store energy because there's too much on the system. Sometimes you discharge. If you keep a battery around the 50% charged level, it lasts a lot longer than if you deeply discharge and then fully charge. And I don't think that your question on cycles would concern me. I'd almost say that it's better to use it than to let it sit, because you will be letting it sit there fully charged in case you have a problem. I'd really rather see it used in a sensible way, and I would not worry about the cycle issue. I have not seen where that has significantly reduced the life.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions, so thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Gardner?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any final matters from any party?
Rocky Mountain Power would request that we call Douglas Marks as a rebuttal witness. I have 3 questions for him, just to clarify some issues that have been raised during the course of today.
Okay. We are at a point where I probably ought to give our court reporter a short break. So maybe a 5-minute break and then come back and do that?
That'd be great, thank you.
At 10 minutes to 12. Okay, we'll be in recess until then. Thank you. Thank you.
Call Douglas Marks as our rebuttal witness.
Okay, and you're still under oath, Mr. Marks?
Good morning, Mr. Marks. Were you here during Mr. Vostag's testimony regarding the company's process for evaluating whether to make transmission or distribution level decisions?
Yes, I was.
And can you describe, for the Commission's benefit, the process that the company uses to evaluate where to invest and what type of investments to make?
Yeah, I'll give a kind of a high-level overview, and also I'll answer a question that also came up from Commissioner Clark earlier too. When we look at system issues, we look at it kind of holistic, and we look for the least cost economic decision to upgrade that. So we will look at distribution, transmission, investments from an economic standpoint. 2 years ago, in 2014, we recognized that these non-traditional investments would be coming into their own in the near future. So inside our decision matrix for all of our planning, that's actually one of the first line items that our engineers that are doing the planning are required to look at is, will a non-traditional solution solve this? So they look at, battery storage. They look at issues like, we have looked at electromechanical battery systems, which are basically giant gyroscopes that we can use for frequency regulation. So that's part of the decision matrix now in all of our states to look at these, because as the costs start to come down, and as Mr. Wilson mentioned, they are coming down very fast in the battery world. As the energy densities get greater, the costs are collapsing fast. So when you look at the decision thing, unless there's a physical component to require a conductor to be changed out, i.e. it's completely overloaded, you may not do that if you can do something else to relieve that. So as we looked at this whole process, we have looked at this in several concepts. We've looked at these in different states, different areas, but this is the first project that came real close to being a very economic decision. And it's actually the first time that it came down to be the lowest first cost for a solution on a system. So again, we're talking here in this aspect about a radial transmission line that does no other purpose except to serve my distribution substation. So when you start to say, how do I solve this problem, we looked at many things. And one of the alternatives in the testimony was basically increasing another substation in the area. So we can put another substation in, we can expand the transmission line, we can increase the regulation on the distribution. So I think when we start to look at a fully optimized system, we look at it holistically and not just say, I've got a little problem. Do I solve it with the transmission because I know my allocation levels are lower, or do I do it on distribution because it's a lower cost? I think you got to do it on a full economic analysis over the life cycle of the projects too. And as I mentioned, the life cycles are tough because you're looking at some future projections. And I know my estimates are pretty much wrong as soon as the ink dries on the paper. So that's kind of the problems you're looking at when you're trying to do this kind of planning stuff. What we believe is with these newer technologies, the battery technologies, electromechanical batteries, whether we use synchro phasers on transmission lines, all of these come into play when you're starting to do your analysis, and how quickly can you put them in, and at what cost can you put them in, and is there a need to do it? Does that answer that?
I think so. Thank you. Mr. Marks is available for additional questions from the Commission or the parties.
Thank you. Mr. Jetter? Thank you. Mr. Olson?
No additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gardner?
Also no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner White?
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions. Thank you.
I don't have anything further either. Thank you, Mr. Marks. Anything further from any party before we adjourn? I'm not seeing any indication, so we're adjourned. Thank you all.